Manam naman manam manam naman manam. Know that there's a God above I cannot see and I cannot touch, but I know that there's a truth. अल्फतेन बिनोन बिनन बिन नुक्ता याद पढ़ाया, अल्फतेन बिनोन बिनन बिन नुक्ता याद पढ़ाया, अल्फतेन बिनोन बिनन बिन नुक्ता। लब आजाद है तेरे, बोल जवाब तक तेरी है।
While Abide With Me getting dropped from beating the retreat yesterday made top headlines across the board, what remained a largely untold story, viewers, is that artists and musicians across the country and across the religious spectrum recited the so-called Christian hymn as an expression of defiance and protest. Well, that has proven to all of us that it is finally going to be musicians and artists who are going to stand up and speak truth to power in the most powerful sense of the term. Well, one such project is the Sufi Gospel project that has been around for a while and is relentlessly working towards, bringing together diverse voices of different faiths, schools of thought, religions, cultures, and talk about a larger and more profound message of peace, quietude, and humanity. Well, we are joined by Sonam Kalra, globally renowned Sufi musician, composer, singer, and of course, the inventor of this revolution called the Sufi Gospel Project. Thanks, Sonam, for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for thinking of me, more importantly, when you want to speak out about inclusion, oneness, and equality.
Highly asked. Let me begin by asking you, Sonam, in this rather polarized environment that we find ourselves in, what part do initiatives and movements like the Sufi Gospel Project play? And I mean, you have also been a part of Synthesis, the Indian News, very recently, which is also a sort of a coming together of musicians and singers, virtually after, Mile Sur Mera Tumhara years ago, to talk about the sort of all-encompassing Indian identity and Indianness. So talk a little bit about the Sufi Gospel Project and tell us about how these projects help in reinstating that very identity.
So to start with, I'm going to pick up from something that you said, that, artists and musicians are the ones that are raising their voices. I think that's always been the case, It's always been for many, many centuries, I think, the arts that have always been the true storytellers, the true truth tellers of what is going on in society. Whilst history books can be rewritten, art cannot, and oral histories cannot be rewritten. And in many ways, artists are oral historians, whether they're writers, musicians, poets. We are the speakers of the times, chroniclers of the time. So I think it's very important as an artist to use your voice, of course, to have a commentary and to tell the truth about what you see going wrong, perhaps, with society, or when it is being fragmented, or when there is polarization that's happening. Interestingly enough, I'm just going to talk about Abide With Me before I give you a little more detail into the Sufi Gospel Project. Abide With Me was something I released actually about 10 or 11 years ago as part of the Sufi Gospel Project. It's interesting to me that it's sort of resurfaced and found a new voice because it was banned from the beating retreat ceremony. And it's been great to see actually the number of people that have resonated with the fact that it is not specifically a Christian hymn. And even if it is, being Christian is part of what it means to be Indian, and being diverse is what it means to be Indian. I recently was speaking at another interview where they asked me what it means to be Indian, and I found myself quoting the preamble, just reminding everyone that freedom of thought and expression is something we've always been allowed. And it was interesting because the lady who was the anchor was not wearing a sari that day, and she was being trolled by one of the viewers, and they were saying, how are you Indian if you're not wearing a sari? And I find these outward appearances of what it means to be Indian rather appalling, because as Vaishnav Jan so rightly says, and it was also one of Mahatma Gandhi's favorite hymns, to be a good Vaishnav, to be a good human being, means that you do not find you do not critique others and their choices. So I find it very strange that we are forgetting what it means to be Indian, the very value of the namaste that we all adopted very willingly during COVID because we wanted not to touch each other's hands. But what does it mean? I know we all say it means I bow to the divine within you. But what does that really mean? That means that I see God in every being that I see, whether that is a tree or an animal or a person. I see God all around me in every living being. And that is something that truly meant, that was truly the crux and the essence of what it meant to be Indian. And that is something I think we're forgetting. The Sufi Gospel Project really is something that came about for me. I think perhaps it was always within me and it just needed the right call from the universe to come out. But, I lived through the 1984 riots when I was very, very young. And I remember being shocked because I grew up in a very, very liberal household where there was no question of, not celebrating Eid or not celebrating Christmas, just what all of us have done as Indians all our lives, right? I don't think you think about who your best friend is and what religion they belong to. And that sort of stuff doesn't even matter, and it shouldn't. And so for me, when I remember in 1984, the Sikhs being targeted specifically because of a label, not the one man who had committed, had killed Mrs. Gandhi, but the fact that there was this need to destroy an entire community, which is what happens whenever there are religious riots. It's ridiculous to me. And I think as a child, I just couldn't wrap my head around why this was happening. And I was so lucky that my parents were never the sort of people who sort of allowed this fear to deepen within me. And they just kept saying, it's fine. This is just a period of time. Everything is great. And of course, there were wonderful times when we saw our neighbors help us. Didn't really matter what religion they belonged to. So I just grew up in this house, which was all about oneness, this understanding truly what it means to be Indian. And when I started singing gospel music first, even though I trained in Hindustani classical music, and I think gospel music also came to me because my mother had been very sick and it was the only thing that was helping me find solace. When I started singing gospel music, I started to get asked by everyone, but you belong to the Sikh religion. How can you be singing a Christian bhajan? And again, it sort of stayed with me that what an odd question to ask me. How does it matter how I call out to God? And that should be my personal choice. Today, if I want to go to a mosque and pay my respects, or if I want to go to a temple, or I want to go to a shrine, or I want to go to a church, those are my choices to make. My religion is personal, faith is personal, and it should not become this militant sort of rule of law that it's tending to become, and this sort of fascist rule of law that religious organizations and heads are taking. It shouldn't be that route. So anyway, I started singing gospel music, and it was quite wonderful the way that it was received across India. And then I got invited to sing at the Dargah of Sufi Inayat Khan Nizamuddin. I think that's when another truth really hit me, that here I am, this girl who belongs to the Sikh religion, and all these labels that people like to put on us, and she sings Christian bhajans or gospel hymns, and she's being invited to a seemingly Islamic space to perform. I just thought I really needed to do something that was befitting of that opportunity, and that's when I started to think of what it meant, a coming together of all of these faiths. And you'll be surprised that the more I researched, the more I found, instead of finding our differences, the more I found our similarities. The more I realized that each of us, and I say this often, I say each of us has our own truth. And no matter where you find that truth, whether that truth is in a temple, a shrine, a church, a mosque, the most important thing that we can remember as children of the same humanity is that each truth, no matter where you find it, is just as valid. And that is really what I wanted to say. So I blended poetry, prayer, and music from different languages and religions, and I put it together to try and create a universal voice of faith. And it was incredible. And I always say these revelations that would come to me, because I would research Abide With Me, which we're talking about. And Abide With Me is this beautiful plea to God to stay by one's side, to watch over one. And the more I thought about that, I went into contemplation. And then suddenly the words of Kabir Das would be revealed to me, where he says, why do you look for me outside when I'm in every breath of every man? Why do you need me to stay with you when I'm already everywhere around you? In Moko kahan dhoonde re bande, main to tere paas mein. ना मैं जप में, ना मैं तप में, ना मैं व्रत उपवास में, ना मैं क्रिया कर्म में रहता, ना ही योग संन्यास में, ना ही प्राण में, ना पिंड में, ना ब्रह्मांड आकाश में, ना मैं भ्रिकुटी भवर गुफा में, सब श्वासन की श्वास में, आई मीन एवरी ब्रेथ ऑफ एवरी मैन, खोजी होए तुरंत मिल जा इस पल की तलाश में, कहें कबीर सुनो भाई साधो, मैं तो हूँ विश्वास में. I mean, the simplicity of what he's saying, and yet the import of what he's saying, the importance of what he's saying. That's really all that I wanted to say through the Sufi Gospel Project, you know.
Very similar to Bulle Shah's poetry, where he says that, Jangal Dhundya, and that
Yes.
it's almost as if Kabir and Bulle Shah, I mean, the ultimate sort of message, the ultimate call to humanity is in fact very similar. And I think
There's a lot of, sorry, go ahead. No, please.
No, so I was saying that you said something very interesting, that artists are the true truth tellers of any epoch, of any era. But in the times that we are living, how do you seek truth? How do you sort of pursue truth, and how do you manifest it ultimately? Because I mean, we live in what we call the post-truth era, and in such times, how do you seek truth, and how do you ultimately sort of present?
It's certainly not an easy thing to do. I think there's a lot of fear in this post-truth era. There's a lot of fear of being judged, and there always has been, perhaps more so now. There is also a great sense of when I say fear of being judged, not just of being sort of called out for telling the truth, but also of being different, of being worrying that it may not be loved by the masses if I seek a path that's slightly different. And I think that's when a personal choice comes in, of bravery, of what you want to do. For me, it was quite simple, actually. It wasn't, I know people have often asked me, it must have been hard to create the Sufi Gospel Project. Weren't you worried about the critique? And, strangely enough, once I knew that I had to tell the truth. And when I say the truth here, in this case, I had to tell my truth of what Sufism meant to me, or what music meant to me, or the reason I was singing and the message I was trying to put across. Once I knew that, nothing really mattered beyond that. I wasn't singing for the sake of appreciation and the vavas or the clapping. I was singing because I did not know any other way to tell my story, to tell my truth. I was singing my truth because I didn't have anything else to say, because I do not know how to be fake. However, given the fact that this is a difficult time, I think that there need to continue to be artists who, and there are many artists, and not just artists, I'll say. I mean, I think we've seen, even in times when things are very difficult, I think when we are roused enough, whether it is at the time of horrific case like Nirbhay's, or when CAA happened, or anything happened, when we're roused enough, our belief systems kick into action, and we are able to come out and tell the truth. What I try to say to people is, stay on that path of authenticity, and of understanding that each of us, we are here, your life must amount to something. These are my personal mottos, that if you're here for a reason. You're not here just to sort of be on social media, or just to live a happy life, live a simple life, if that's what you want to do. But I really believe that if you can even do one act of good in your life, of helping someone, of being the voice for the voiceless, of helping someone who just wasn't in a position, of using your platform as an artist to say what's important to be said, then I really believe you've had a valid life. But that's, again, a personal belief. I'm not here to shove my beliefs down anyone's throat, but I really do believe, for me, it was very important that my music have a message, and therefore it was easy for me to tell the truth. And when I say easy, I'm not going to say I haven't been trolled. I've been trolled a billion times on social media. I was even told I was responsible for all kinds of nonsense. But do I care? Do I wear my blinkers and literally keep my head down and say, this is the path that I can see, and I can see it so clearly, so I'm not going to let all of this noise cloud me. So one of the ways to keep following the truth is to cut out the noise.
Sonam, Kalra, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for doing what you do, because it really matters. Thank you.
No, thank you for listening and for resonating, allowing what I say and what I try and say through my music to resonate with you. It really, really means so much, and it warms my heart to know that people like you are listening and are trying to take the same thoughts forward. Thank you.